Welcome to the Beauty in Battle podcast, where we talk about winning in marriage by waging a war. I'm Jason Benham. I've got my girlfriend / wife, Tori Benham, with me, and we are here to talk to you about how Satan tries to get you to fight face to face with your spouse, but God designed you to fight shoulder to shoulder against Satan so that you can win in your marriage. Fighting together draws you together. We cannot wait to jump in. So here we go. So today we're talking about buried emotions, which is, it's kind of a deep topic, but Tori and I have learned a lot in this category. And we've actually done several podcasts on the power of emotions and what you can do in terms of dealing with your emotions. And so what we wanted to talk about today is the danger of buried emotions, because it can come up and bite you in the butt, and it can wreck your relationship without you even really knowing it, because they're emotions that you've had from the past. So, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an exercise, but before we do that, we don't have a joke for you, but Tori does have a song.
Okay. So this song is one that we've played at a few of the conferences that we've done.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Yes.
It's called I Get to Love You by Ruel.
Ruel. Yeah.
Ruelle, if you're looking it up.
Yeah, it's epic.
It is so good. So do you want to play a little tiny
I'm going to play
teaser?
I'm going to play just a little, like 8-second, 10-second piece of this, but I wanted to say real quick, because Tori and I don't know if many of you have been to some of the marriage seminars that we've done, but one of the things that I typically like to do is on the Friday night after we do our second session, I like to get the couples together, and we typically will have candles all in the room or whatever, and we actually dance to slow songs.
I love it.
It is so fun. But we play this song. This is one of the songs that we play. We got several that we play. And it's just fantastic to see, because a lot of these couples, it's been, it'll be like decades since the last time they danced with each other. And so we force them to do it, and it's fun, and it's always a good time. So this is one of the songs we play. It's I Get to Love You by Ruel. So what we're going to say is we're going to play it, but then what we want you to do is find it on iTunes or whatever, and then you dance with your spouse.
Yeah, that's
to the song.
And maybe we will too, huh?
Oh, let's do it. Maybe we'll do it right now. Hold on. Here you go. Ready? Okay, that's it. There you go, Ruel.
We were just playing this like in our house a few minutes ago, and I looked at Jason, and he was making full-on eye contact with our dog, Rocky.
Now, I was only looking at Rocky because he looked really cute, because he was sitting there staring at you.
I was like, babe, is this you and Rocky, or is it me and you?
Hey, so if you guys ever do take us up on one of our marriage intensive that actually happens at our house, you'll get to meet Rocky.
Yeah, he gets attached pretty quick.
Yeah, he's very much emotionally aware dog. Okay, so now we're talking about emotions. Here's what I want you to do. Now, you may be driving your car, you may be doing something where you can do this, but you might be working out, and so you can't. But what I want you to do is grab your phone. If you can grab your phone and actually hold it out in front of your face, like with your arms straight. So you're holding the phone out with your arms straight. If you don't have a phone, or if you're listening to this on something else, I don't know what that could be. Just pick something up. It doesn't matter what it is, and just hold it straight out in front of your face. Okay, your arm is extended. Now just hold it there. And now imagine if this entire podcast for the next 20 to 30 minutes or however long this is going to be, you hold that phone or that object, you just hold it out right there the entire time. What do you think your arm is going to feel like at the end of the podcast?
Tired.
Your shoulder's going to be burning like crazy. You might even feel it in your elbow, your forearm. I don't know, who knows where you're going to feel it, but it is going to feel like you are holding a locomotive. But when in reality, you're not. You see, the weight of your phone is not determined by the physical weight of your phone. The weight is determined by how long you hold on to it. So the longer you hold on to your phone like that, the heavier it's going to get. The same is true with your emotions. The weight of your emotions are determined by how long you hold them in. So you can have you can have like these crazy subconscious experiences that are so heavy and so weighty, and you're struggling with your temper, or you're struggling with some insecurity or whatever, and or you're struggling with a fear or doubt or anything like that. And it feels so heavy. You're like, I can't overcome this. I don't even know what's going on in me. But the fact is that's probably a buried emotion from a long time ago,
Right.
that you never got to the bottom of. And what we find is that our culture rewards people for how well they hold things together in the midst of a struggle. Like, oh, look at her. She's doing so well. She's holding it together so well. Or look at him. You know, I know he's going through, he's real busy right now, but he's holding things together. And our culture rewards people for holding things together. But just imagine that like you're holding your arm out, holding on to this weight. Now, I'm not saying that you become a blithering mess where you're blabbing your emotions everywhere. No. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying if you look in the Psalms with David, when he wrote the Psalms, that was somebody who was showing anything but holding it together.
Yeah.
So in his prayer journal, which is the Psalms, David typically released his emotions like crazy at the beginning of the Psalm, and then he redeemed them. You know, he'd release and redeem. So he would just let it out, and he would just blah, blah, blah. God, it's awful. Like wicked people are making all the money and we're not making anything.
I know there's been so many times where I've read the Psalms and I'm like, he's got major issues.
Yes.
David has major issues. But then you're like, this is like a man after God's own heart. That's how God speaks of David, and that he's a man after his own heart. And he's somebody who let it all out. He didn't hold back, let it all out.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of a song. Shout, shout, let it all out. These are the things. Okay. Yeah. So sorry about that. Google that song. It's classic 80s. But anyway, David shows us exactly what you're supposed to do. In the privacy of your time with God, you're letting it out. You're fully letting it out. Now, we did a podcast on this. It's one of our first 10, I think, The Power of Emotions or something like that, where we talk about let it out, let it go, let it happen.
Yes.
Those 3 steps. It's actually very powerful. I'm not going to go into that, but those are 3 really powerful steps. But for David, when you look at him releasing his emotions and then redeeming them in terms of he would pivot, and then in the middle of crying out to God, talking about how bad things were, he would actually say, but you are God, you are King, you are in control, you are powerful, you have created me. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Like all of this kind of stuff that David said. So he would let his emotion, he didn't bury his emotions.
Yeah.
But yet he did it in his prayer journal. He didn't blast it on Facebook. Like don't go questioning God in public on Instagram or Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
Like just let your questions to God go directly to him and to some of the trusted people that God has brought to you in terms of accountability and people who love you and love the Lord. But you've got to let them go. And so how do we become like those types of people who don't allow our emotions to be buried? Well, we got to process them.
Yeah.
You've got to process them, and then you've got to pivot. So those 2 things are the only 2 things I really want you to remember before Tori gets in and shares with you some really powerful stuff that she's researched and learned about emotions and feelings. But just think about this: process and pivot. This is what David did when I said he released and redeemed. So he processed them and then he pivoted. So processing, you got to process the emotion first, which basically means that you think through it, factoring in God into the situation. So something that happens to you, like for me, when I was 13, if you read the book, 13 years old, I got my heart broken by a girl, and I cried for about 30 seconds, and then I toughened up. I walked right back out into that little party where we were as a 13-year-old, and I never cried about it again, and I totally forgot about it until I started to experience insecurities in my own marriage 30 years later, or 25 years later, and I realized that I had a buried emotion.
Yeah.
And it was so heavy, and I didn't even realize it. And Tori helped me walk through that. So then as I walked through that emotion, I had to go back as an adult in my mind and say, oh, okay, that situation there, okay, I see what happened. That actually wasn't as big of a deal as what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And God was, still on the throne at that time, and it may be a situation where you experienced abuse or you experienced abandonment or whatever. And it's important at that time, you can't rewrite your history in terms of the actual thing that happened, but you can rewrite the way that you process it. You can rewrite the way that you remember it to where you think, oh, you know what? That was a terrible, terrible situation. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it made me strong.
Yeah.
It made me strong because God was right there the whole time.
Yeah. That's so good. There's a quote, and I don't even know where it comes from, but it's emotions buried alive never die.
Yeah.
And that's just so true for you. There was this emotion that was buried alive, and it just kept on getting kind of hit and nicked and bumped into. And it became pretty evident that there was something down there that we needed to process through and kind of get to the bottom of.
Yeah. And the story that reminds me of, there's two, actually. One is a Bible story, one is a movie, a Disney movie. We'll talk about that in just a second. But the first is a Bible story with Elisha, the prophet. And he and a bunch of his other prophet buddies, they were going to build another building that needed to be built, and they were all going to do the work themselves. So they had to borrow tools, because these are Levites. These are like priest guys that didn't have their own tools. So they all borrowed tools, and they were cutting down trees. And this one priest, Levite guy, was cutting down the tree. And when he went to swing his axe, the blade head fell off, and it flew back into the river, and it landed in there. And he yelled out, "Oh my gosh, I can't keep cutting the tree without an axe blade." And two, it was borrowed, and back in those days, that was a big deal. I mean, this is like the tool of your trade.
Right.
So somebody who earns his living by the axe blade, now all of a sudden this Levite lost it. So that'd be like somebody borrowing $10,000 and wasting it, and you're not going to get it back. And so it was a big deal for him to get it back. And so he went to Elisha and told him, "Hey, I lost this axe blade and this axe head, and it wasn't mine. I actually borrowed it." And the first thing that Elisha said was, "Show me where you lost it." So the guy took him to the spot in the river, and he pointed to that spot, and he said, "Okay, I lost it right about there." So then Elisha takes a stick and he throws it into the river, and the axe head, the steel, floated to the top. And then he said, "Okay, now you see it. Now go back and get it." So the guy waded into the river and he went back and got it. And it was a miracle. It was a miraculous story. But I think the same is true when it comes to emotions, that in our life as adults and in marriage, that oftentimes we may be responding in ways that's detrimental to our own relational and emotional and physical well-being because of something that happened to us a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the first thing that you have to do is go back to that spot where you lost your edge. Like the earliest memory that you can think of where you lost the edge, like what was it?
Yeah.
What did you go through? Did somebody laugh at you when you tried a new dance move on the dance floor as an 8-year-old? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could be something simple like that.
Yeah.
But you've been holding it in all these years. So you go back to where you lost your edge. And then, that stick that Elisha threw into the river, a lot of commentators say that stick was the same type of wood that was the cross, the tree that Jesus hung on. That was the cross. It was the same type of wood. So you're now bringing Christ into that situation, and you're making sure that you're reprocessing that same situation through adult eyes, putting Jesus into the mix. So now it's like Jesus was right there the whole time. He didn't leave me, even though I may have felt abandoned. And the last thing is, when you do that and you're beginning to reprocess, watch what happens. The supernatural begins to come, begins to take place. And, axe heads, that's steel. They don't float. The supernatural came and took over, and that axe head did something that was against its nature. You watch what happens as buried emotions will start to come to the surface when you reprocess through the lens of where God was in that situation and that he was making you strong in the midst of it. His supernatural power will come through, and you'll figure out what it is, and you'll be able to reprocess that. So that's the first thing, is processing. So that's the Bible story that I remember.
Good. I love that story.
And the movie, Tor, we just watched it like 2 weeks ago.
What's that?
Disney's The Kid.
Oh, yes. I thought you were going
different one
to a Disney. Yeah, I gotcha.
But Disney's The Kid.
Yeah.
With Bruce Willis.
So good. Oh my goodness. You guys need to watch that movie. It was so good. When was that? When did that come out?
I think it had been like, I don't know, early 90s or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really old with Bruce Willis.
Yeah. And it's my dad's favorite movie. And so other than Braveheart, obviously, or The Passion, but Disney's The Kid, this little kid, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. So if you're going to watch it, you can just press, just fast forward this for a second. But I just got to tell you, because it's powerful. It's all about Bruce Willis as an adult who's acting like a jerk.
Right.
He's so busy and he's very filthy rich, but he's acting in ways that it was all based on something that happened to him when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And so he was acting out of these insecurities. And somehow, in Disney-like fashion, his 8-year-old self, was he 8?
He was 8. I think he was.
Yeah, his 8-year-old self came back, and now his 8-year-old self is going to teach his adult self how to have fun again.
Right.
And
really show him who he really is.
Yeah.
Because he's lost himself as an adult.
But his 8-year-old self, that's when he lost his edge. And then they show you at the end of the movie where exactly it was that he lost his edge. His mom ends up dying. Again, this is spoiler alert. His mom ends up dying, and his dad was so frustrated at the whole situation that he blamed it on his 8-year-old son. And his 8-year-old son now believed that he was the one that killed his mom. And from that point forward, he was on a constant quest to prove that he was worthy.
Yeah, he
to be alive.
Just shut down his emotions.
Yeah.
He didn't let himself feel. He just became super hardcore and just success driven and lost himself completely.
So then you see Bruce Willis as an adult, then consoling his 8-year-old self when they went back through that situation, telling him, "Look, Dad had it tough. You know, Dad didn't mean that. Like Dad, he was
Dad
reprocessing.
is in pain. Dad is just going through the hardest time of his life.
Yeah.
He doesn't mean what he said.
Yeah. And so here Bruce Willis was, reprocessing it as an adult, and it just changed his life.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a Disney movie, so everything's got to work out perfect. But it is so true that when you go through things early in life, and it could be, early in your marriage, your spouse said something to you that really cut you, and you tried to bring it up, but then they got defensive about it. And so you've just buried it down, and you've never really processed it through. Yeah. So that's the first thing, is to process. The second thing is to then pivot.
Right.
After you've processed, you've got to pivot. And the pivot is a mindset shift where you project power into the future. It's all about projecting power into the future. See, Satan wants you to project powerlessness into the future. And another way of saying that is anxiety. Anxiety is about a future potential threat. Fear is about a past or present threat. But anxiety projects powerlessness into the future. And in order for you to pivot after you've processed your emotions, you have to project power in the future and say, "Okay, God, now here we are. I may still feel some of these same emotions, but I know the root of what was causing that. And I'm not going to live in light of that anymore, because you're God, you're King. You can live through me. You can be powerful to overcome this." Yep. So I say all of that to just, because I really want Tori to share with you some of the stuff that she's been researching, because it's really helpful, where we can start talking about feelings and emotions and those types of things.
And just to go back to the movie The Kid, I think what was so powerful about that film was you've got the cutest little kid you've ever seen. I mean, it was the cutest actor. We were just like dying laughing at his little mannerisms.
Yeah.
But here's this little chubby kid, and your heart is just completely drawn to him as a kid.
Yeah.
And then he turns into this really big jerk. And you're like super unlikable grown adult versus the most likable kid you could who could ever play.
Like probably even better than Macaulay Culkin on Home Alone.
He really was. And you're just so drawn to the kid, right? You're just so drawn to the child. And I think it's so important to remember we were all kids once. We were, even when you're thinking about your spouse, we talked about this in past podcasts, that sometimes you have to look at your spouse like that's the kid in them. That's something, there's a wound there that maybe from childhood, but there's a kid inside. And if you can see that and you can empathize with that, it really does change your posture towards your spouse and even towards yourself. Like watching that, I'm like, man, like what were the things what did I act like as a kid? What were some of the things, some of the insecurities and the things that have, shaped me into the adult that I am now. And I loved it so much because it gets your wheels turning and thinking about some of those past hurts that may have defined you and that you need to get to the bottom of.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that Rachel Beck said on a few of our, a couple podcasts ago, where she was talking about her husband, Eric, and they were talking about, I forget if it was good marriage culture or what it was we were talking about, But she said it was really important for her that when Eric was operating out of an insecurity, she had to look and say, you know what, this isn't 48-year-old Eric talking to me right now. This is 12-year-old Eric. Now, of course, you don't want to say that to your spouse
right
in the middle of it.
But she was endeared to that.
Yeah, endeared to him as a young man.
Yeah, it's so good. So we've read several books this year on emotions and just trying to unpack some of that and learn. And one of the books that we read was The Voice of the Heart, A Call to Full Living by Chip Dodds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Discover the Gift of the 8 Feelings. And there's so many books about emotions, and there's even an emotion wheel out there that helps you to kind of define what emotions you're feeling. Sometimes it's just so hard for us to even know what we're feeling.
Yeah, it's tough.
And but this one was a little bit different, but it was really, really helpful. And he uses a lot of scripture. And basically what he's trying to unpack throughout this book is that we have feelings for a purpose, that God gave us feelings. And over the course of our lives, feelings sometimes have gotten into the way of us feeling fulfilled. Like we've had these feelings and we feel as if they have hurt us in some ways. Mm-hmm. And we have to kind of relearn the feelings and know what the purpose is behind them.
Yeah.
And so that we can feel deeply. And he talks about how, let me just kind of go over quickly the 8 feelings that he talks about. There's hurt, lonely, sad, anger, fear, shame, guilt, and glad. And
those are 8 core feelings, core emotions that we have, that everything springs off of that.
Yes. So there's so many different emotions that come from those feelings. But he said there's 8 core feelings.
Yeah.
And they have each one has a very defined purpose. And but so often it can turn into an impairment. It becomes this. So hurt becomes resentment when the purpose of hurt is healing and courage.
Okay.
Loneliness can turn to apathy when its purpose was for intimacy.
Loneliness is meant to lead you to intimacy. I like that. That's good. Sadness,
it can turn to self-pity when it was designed for acceptance. And anger can lead to pride and depression when its purpose is passion.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. Yeah. Like even God got angry.
Right.
Yeah.
And then fear can lead to anxiety when its purpose was wisdom and faith.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Teach that fear first.
But when we're using it in our flesh, it becomes anxiety. Rejected powerlessness.
Oh, it's awful.
It's terrible. It is awful. And then shame can lead to toxic shame or contempt when it's meant for humility.
Yes, that is true. You should be ashamed of your sin.
Right.
For sure. And it should make you humble.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then guilt, toxic shame, and shamelessness when it was meant for freedom and forgiveness.
Yeah, guilt. Yeah, that's good.
And then the last one is glad. And when it's not used properly, it turns to sensuous or sensual pleasure without the heart. When its purpose is joy with sadness.
Oh,
which is he kind of gets into that in that chapter, but it's so true. Like I think we think of being glad as this, as happiness and circumstances, and when the reality is there's a joy that sometimes comes through sadness, that you have to deeply feel a loss before you know the joy.
Yeah. And I can say that for anybody who's got kids who are older, that you have to go through the pain of not having any time to do anything with anybody ever, and not even being able to go out to eat. And you go through that hard time, and then all of a sudden your kids get a little older, and then they go off to school, and the next thing you know, you can actually go out to lunch with your spouse, and you're like, I'm experiencing a joy right now for just being able to go to lunch like I've never felt before.
Right. Yeah. Like sometimes you have to go through things to really experience the joy on the other side. Whereas oftentimes we just want so badly to feel that fulfillment of joy, that fulfillment of gladness, that we substitute and we look for the quick fix. something that will give it to us in the immediate instead of waiting for it.
And Eastern medicine, which is Chinese medicine, what they talk about, and they've been talking about this for thousands of years, and it's only in the last probably 20, 30 years that Western medicine is actually picking up on some of this stuff. What Eastern medicine says is these obviously buried emotions never die, but emotions, trapped emotions, actually exist inside your organs.
Right.
Like grief. If you felt grief over something and you didn't process it properly, it actually rests down in your lungs to where you have a hard time breathing.
Yeah.
And I think anger takes place in the heart to where maybe you feel heart arrhythmia and you can feel some things.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that everybody who has trouble breathing has some anger, has some grief problem or anything. I mean, obviously not.
Right.
But I do believe that that's true because
there are some manifestations in your body.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You don't want to discard it and go, oh, that's cultish stuff. Like that's Eastern medicine or whatever. Well, there is some truth to it. I wouldn't go all the way with it, but there is some truth to that if you've got buried emotions, it will hurt your physical body.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the scripture? I forget which one it says, but envy rots the bones.
Right.
Like literally, it's saying that the envy that you feel, that emotion of envy, which is the opposite of contentment. It's like you want something that someone else has and you don't want them to have it.
Right.
It literally rots your bones, which means it will negatively affect your physical body that will lead to sickness and disease. Envy. It's like you don't want to be sick. Well, don't be envious.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of other ways that you don't need to be sick, but it is true that the emotions that you have, if you don't learn to process them and then pivot, those two things, they can wreck your body, your physical body, and we don't want that to happen to you.
Yeah. Proverbs 3, when you were saying that, I looked it up real quick. Proverbs 3, this is another verse. 7 says, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones.
That's right. And when you read verses like that in the scripture, don't just gloss over it. Like you've heard that ever since you were in vacation Bible school. Yeah. Health to your body and healing to your bones. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah. It's good for you. No. Take that in. He just said it will heal your bones.
Right.
Which means it will be a part of your healing process. You don't just need to take the pill. You don't just need to do the rehab. You don't just need to go to the doctor. You need to do these things. Get your emotions, go and process them, and then pivot into power. Project powerfulness into the future, and then watch what can and probably will happen to your physical body.
It's so true.
So I love this stuff. So Tori and I wanted to just share that with you. Buried emotions never die. Don't hold on to it. Remember, the weight of your emotion is not determined by how heavy the emotion is. It's determined by how long you've been holding on to it. Just like if you're going to take a pen, just a regular pen that you write with, and you hold it out straight with your arm and just hold it there for 3 hours and tell me how heavy that pen feels.
Yeah, exactly.
You've held on to it too long. It's time to let it go because Satan wants you to hold on to it. And so right now, if you're listening to this and you're someone who right now you're already thinking about these things and maybe you're feeling a little burn in your heart, maybe you feel a little burn in your spirit, the Holy Spirit's talking to you, spend some time with him. Spend some time with him and ask God to show you. And then get someone or some others involved that love you, that know you, and can help you process through that. Go back to where you lost your edge. Reprocess it with Christ in picture. Okay? And then watch the supernatural take over. And then you're going to pivot. And you're going to have a mindset shift where you're going to project power into the future. And then you're going to experience some freedom. So
good.
There we go. Do you have a recipe?
Yes. So I'm going to share with you guys a recipe that Jason has made mention to several times on the podcast. And some of you are asking for it. It's called the Ranger. I don't even know what it's called.
They're Ranger cookies.
Is it just Ranger cookies?
Yeah,
or is it Ranger chocolate chip cookies? I think it's just called Ranger cookies.
Okay.
This is a recipe that we've been making for, let's see, over 18 years.
Yeah.
Because it was when we started this bread Becker journey where we would mill our own wheat. Do you remember
bread
that?
Bread Beckers,
you and I used to do that. And then it started making such a mess after several years. We're like, I can't do it anymore. It was like our whole kitchen was full of flour because we would get the actual grain and then mill it. Anyways, one of the recipes we have never gotten rid of. That's for sure. It's called
Ranger
the Ranger
cookies.
cookies, and it's with it's like chocolate chip oatmeal recipe.
Yeah,
And oh my gosh, we make them probably once a week.
Yes.
And Jason and I have
I can't stop eating.
learned the science of doing it together. Like we can knock it out in like, I would say 15 minutes.
Oh, and then I'm the cleaner guy.
Yeah. We got it down to a science. So we'll share it with you guys. You tell us what you think.
So Tori will load these up on social media at Jason and Tori, right?
Yep.
That's what you're doing?
Go to our Jason Tori Instagram. I will have this typed up for you guys. And I'm give you a little tip. With this particular cookie, you have to undercook it.
Oh, yeah, you do.
I'll put that in the recipe. I will correct the time.
Because although I eat lots of the cookie dough, when she puts it in the refrigerator and the next day I pull them out, it is a party in your mouth.
You just told them my tip. You just jumped the gun.
Oh, that's what you were going to do.
You're going to want...
I'm an idiot.
So once you let these cookies cool, the tip, which Jason just gave you,
it's the pro tip.
He couldn't control himself, is you're going to throw them in the fridge and cool them. They are so much better cooled.
Oh.
Which is abnormal for a chocolate chip cookie, but these ones, undercooked and cold, oh my gosh.
The next day.
They're so good.
Yeah. So that's it. Ranger cookies and buried emotions. And if you've got buried emotions, make the Ranger cookies while you're processing through. It'll help. It'll help a lot. All right. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and hit our website. If you know any type of leader, anybody, entrepreneur, anybody in the for-profit space, the nonprofit space, ministry, whatever, Tori and I love talking with folks about marriage and love. We got a little coaching business on it. And so visit us, beautyandbattle.com or jasonandtori.com, goes the same place. In the meantime, can't wait for you to tune in for the next one. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next, but
it's going to be good.
I'm excited, and I'm really excited for the food piece because Tori always has really good ideas. You do, you have good ideas. She's Italian.
We do like food.
All right, see you next week.
See you guys.